There is an old saying among the men who carry other men's burdens, the porters and the carters, and the boys who sweep the steps before the gentry are awake, that you may learn the whole of a person's soul by watching how they speak to the one who can do nothing for them in return. A bow to a lord costs nothing, for a lord may remember it. A kind word to a beggar is the truer coin, for the beggar can pay no interest on it. Adrian had heard the saying first from a groom when he was a boy, and he had thought it pretty and forgotten it, as the rich forget most things that do not concern them. He was 34 before he came to understand that it had been the most important sentence anyone had ever spoken in his hearing. He was, by the time this account begins, the Duke of Ravensmoor, and he was very tired of being a duke. It was not the weight of the estates, nor the tenants, nor the endless letters that wanted his name at the foot of them. It was the eyes. Wherever he went, there were eyes that did the arithmetic of him before he had finished crossing a room, eyes that added up his acres and his houses and the rumoured figure of his yearly income, and then arranged a face above themselves to suit the sum. He had been courted, flattered, hunted. He had watched mothers steer their daughters into his path as a carter steers a horse, and he had watched the daughters smile the smile they had been taught. And once, when he was younger and had believed himself loved, he had watched a woman he meant to marry weigh him in a single sentence overheard through a half-closed door. "He is dull," she had told her sister, laughing, "but he is a duke, and one does not marry a man. One marries his rent roll." He had not been wounded so much as instructed, and a wound, he would learn much later, always teaches you the wrong lesson if you let it teach you alone. The lesson he had taken was this, that he could never be certain, that every soft word offered him might be offered to the coronet behind his head, and not the man beneath it, and that he had no way under heaven to tell the one from the other, because no one had ever met him without first meeting his title. He had grown watchful, and his watchfulness had hardened into a kind of cold, and the cold had at last produced a plan so foolish that only a clever and lonely man could have thought of it. He would go where no one knew his face. He would put off his name as a man puts off a coat. He would become nobody, a hired man with rough clothes and rougher hands, and he would find some woman of no fortune and no expectation, and he would learn, once and for all, and for the first time in his life, whether a woman could love a man who had nothing to give her but himself. It was, he told himself, an experiment. He did not yet know it was a theft. The town of Harnwell sat where two old roads crossed, and there was one particular street in it where the air turned as you walked, from molten river mud to the dry smell of paper, and that street ended at a tall, narrow shop with a faded sign above the door that read, "Hale and Sons, Booksellers," and beneath it, smaller and circulating library, though there was no son to keep it yet but a boy too small for the work, and the man whose name was Hale lay in the churchyard with the rain falling on him the same as it fell on the Duke's. Adrian came to that door on a grey afternoon in a borrowed coat with the damp working into his bones, and he gave the name Tom Carey to the old man who answered, and he asked whether there was work for a strong back. The old man was called Pell, and he was a binder and a pressman, half deaf and entirely stooped, with hands stained black at the creases past any washing. He looked Tom Carey up and down with the slow thoroughness of a man who has stopped being surprised by anything the world cares to send him. His gaze rested a moment on Tom's hands, which were broad and capable but smooth, the hands of a man who had never carried a hod nor pulled an oar, and something passed behind the old eyes, some private observation filed away and not spoken. "You've not portered before?" Pell said. "No," said Adrian. "It seems safest to give the truth where the truth cost nothing. Crates are heavy and the pay is light and the master's dead," said Pell. "So it's the mistress you'll answer to, and she'll not thank you to be idle. Can you lift, and can you hold your tongue, and can you keep from helping yourself to what's not yours?" "I can." "Then you'll do till you don't." And that was the whole of the examination, for old Pell asked no man his history, having too much of his own to want to trade in it. He turned and shuffled back into the dim of the shop, and Adrian, who had dined 3 nights before with a marquess and a cabinet minister, picked up the topmost of a stack of book crates and followed a deaf old binder into the back of a failing shop, and felt, absurdly, something in his chest unclenched that had been clenched for 15 years. He had been an hour at the work, sorting and shelving under Pell's barked corrections when she came down. He heard her on the stair before he saw her, a quick light step, and then she was at the counter with a ledger under her arm and a smudge of ink along the side of her hand, and she stopped when she saw him, a stranger in her shop, and Adrian braced himself for the look he knew, the look that measures. He was a ragged man in a wet coat. He knew already what the measuring would conclude, and he was ready to be invisible, which is the natural condition of the poor in the eyes of everyone but other poor. She did not measure him. She looked at his face. "You must be the new man," she said. "Pell told me he meant to take someone on. I am Beatrice Hale." She did not offer her hand, for that would not have been proper between a mistress and a hired man, but she inclined her head a small, precise degree, as one does to a person and not to a function. "What is your name?" "Tom, miss. Tom Carey." "You've come a long way in poor weather by the look of you." Her eyes went to the dark stain of rain across his shoulders, and there was nothing in her face of distaste, only a plain practical concern, the same she might have shown a soaked dog or a soaked bishop. "There's a fire in the back room and the kettle's near the boil. Warm yourself before you take a chill. The crates will keep half an hour, and a dead porter is no use to me." A flicker of something that was almost humour. "Pell will tell you I am hard. I am only careful. There is a difference, though it is hard to feel from the wrong side of it." And she went back up the stair with her ledger, and Adrian stood among the crates with the strangest sensation he had known in years, which was the sensation of having been seen by someone who had not first seen anything else. He did not warm himself by the fire. He went on with the crates, because he found he wanted to deserve the half hour she had offered him, and not merely take it. But that night, in the narrow cold room above the press that Pell let to him for a few pence off his wage, he lay awake a long while, and he thought, with the irritation of a man whose plan has misbehaved on its very first day, "That proves nothing. She's kind to a stranger because kindness costs her a kettle and an inclination of the head. It is easy to be kind when nothing is asked. We shall see her when something is asked." He did not have long to wait, for something, in the shape of a man named Hugh Vane, was already asking, and would go on asking until it had asked the whole of her life away. He learned of Vane from Pell, in the way one learns most true things, sideways and overwork. They were stitching the broken spine of a folio, the old man's blackened fingers moving with a sureness his eyes had long since lost, and Pell talked, as the deaf often do, in a low, steady stream that wanted no answer. "You'll see him soon enough," Pell said. "Vane, wine and spices and money lent at the back of it, which is where the real trade is, for spice spoils and money never does. The old master borrowed of him when the trade went thin, and signed what was put before him, and didn't read it close, being a trusting man, which is the worst thing a poor man can be. Now the master's gone, and the paper's Vane's, and Vane holds this shop the way a cat holds a mouse it's not yet hungry enough to eat." He bit a thread. "And lately he's taken to calling, not for his money, for her." "For Miss Hale?" "For Miss Hale." Pell's mouth worked. "He's a widower and rich, and the shop would be a small thing to him, a curiosity, a way to say he owns the place his betters buy their reading. And she'd be a smaller thing, a pretty piece behind the counter that he could own and show." He smiles at her like a man pricing a horse, and she smiles back because she must, because he could put her mother and the boy into the street between one quarter-day and the next, and there's no one to stop him. He looked up then, and his dim eyes found Adrian's with a sudden uncomfortable directness. "You'd want to mind yourself when he comes, Tom Carey. Men like that don't like a servant who carries himself like he's not one." Adrian became aware that he was standing too straight. He bent his shoulders a degree and said nothing, and filed away with cold interest the news that the woman in whom he had taken an experimental interest was being slowly purchased over her own counter. Vane came 2 days later, out of a thin, spitting rain. He was not what Adrian had pictured. He had pictured a brute. Vane was fine-boned and elegant, and his smile arrived before he did, and stayed a little too long. He came through the door, bringing the cold with him, and took off his gloves finger by finger, as though the shop and everything in it were already his, and he was deciding whether to keep them. "Miss Hale," he said, and the two words were a caress and a contract at once. "Mr. Vane." Beatrice came round the counter, and Adrian, kneeling over a crate in the shadow of the shelves, watched her put on her composure like a woman putting on armour. smooth and complete and giving nothing. You find us at our work. I find you charming as ever in your little kingdom of dust. Vane's eyes moved over the shop, totting it up, though I confess I cannot think it good for you, this air. All this paper, breeding damp. A woman of your quality, immured among the coffings of strangers who pay you tuppence to borrow what they cannot buy. His gaze fell on Adrian then, snagged, and the smile changed its quality, sharpened. And what is this? A new ornament? My porter, said Beatrice, Carey. He is new. He is wet, said Vane with delicate distaste, and he is in my way. For Adrian had risen, a crate in his arms to carry it through, and his path lay across the opened floor where Vane stood. Adrian stopped and lowered his eyes, and waited, as a servant waits, for the gentleman to move. Vane did not move. He looked at Adrian with the lazy cruelty of a man who has found in a dull afternoon a small entertainment. Well, go round, fellow, or do you expect me to give way to a pack-horse? And as Adrian, jaw tight, turned to go round, Vane lifted the gloves in his hand and flicked them lightly, contemptuously across the side of Adrian's face. It was not a blow. It was less than a blow, and worse than one. It was the gesture a man makes to an animal that has come too near, and the whole of Vane's pleasure was in its smallness. Adrian stood very still. He could have ended it with a sentence, 4 words, and the world would have rearranged itself around him. The man before him would have gone white and then very busy with apology, and the gloves would never have been raised. The words were in his mouth. He held them there, and he held still, and the holding was the hardest thing he had done in years, harder than any grief, because every fibre of 15 years of unquestioned command was screaming in him to be known. He did not have to bear it long. He did not have to bear it at all in the end, because she would not let him. You will not do that again. Beatrice's voice was not loud. That was the terror of it. It was perfectly level and perfectly cold, and it cut across the shop like a drawn line. She had stepped between them, and she was a head shorter than either, and she stood with her back to Adrian and her face to the man who could ruin her, and she did not waver. Not to him, not to anyone under this roof. You may hold my father's debt, Mr. Vane, and you may call here as often as the law allows you, but you will not raise your hand, nor your glove, nor your voice, to a man in my employ who has given you no cause. He is mine to direct and mine to defend, and while he stands in my shop, he stands under my protection, which I find I value rather more highly than I had supposed. There was a silence you could have stood a coin on its edge in. Vane's smile did not fall, but it set, the way a thing sets that has just learned it is harder than it looked and been displeased by the lesson. How very fierce, he murmured, over a porter. He drew his gloves slowly back on. You will spend that fierceness more wisely one day, I think, when you have learned what it costs you. Good afternoon, Miss Hale. I shall call again at the quarter on the matter of the account. We shall have by then a great deal to discuss. And he went out into the rain, and the smell of him, cold and sweet, hung in the shop a moment, and then was gone. Beatrice did not turn round at once. Adrian saw her shoulders rise and fall, once with a breath she had been holding. When she did turn, her composure was back, but something had cost her. He could see the price of it in the faint shake of the hand she pressed flat against the counter. I am sorry, Carey, she said quietly. You should not have had to stand for that. You should not have had to stand between, miss, said Adrian, and his voice was not quite steady, and he could not have said to save his life, whether it was Tom Carey who spoke, or the man beneath him. He holds everything, she said simply, as though that explained it, which it did, and I find there are still some things he does not hold. She straightened a stack of pamphlets that did not need straightening. Go and warm yourself now. That is an order, and you are bound to obey it. The ghost of the earlier humour. It is the only kind of order I am fit to give today. That night Adrian did not lie to himself, which was a new thing for him, and an uncomfortable one. He sat in the cold room over the press, and he made himself look at what he had done that day, which was nothing, and at what she had done, which was everything. She had set herself between a hired stranger and the man who held her family's whole future in a drawer, and she had done it for a porter who could give her not so much as a kind word that would be worth anything in the world's account. She had spent her one coin of power, the only fierceness a cornered woman owns, on the least of the people in the room. By the saying of the grooms, by the only measure Adrian had ever found that did not lie. She had shown him the whole of her soul in a single sentence, and it was finer than any soul he had met in the gilded rooms where souls were for sale. And he had let her do it under a false name, to test her. The word for it came to him plainly in the dark, and he did not flinch from it, though he wanted to. Coward. He was conducting an experiment upon a woman who had just risked her family's bread to defend him, and he was doing it from behind a mask where it was safe, where he risked nothing, where if she failed his test he could simply walk away and resume the coronet and lose nothing but an illusion he had not believed in anyway. She had risked everything in the open, and he had risked nothing in the dark, and he had the gall to call it a test of her honour. The honour under examination, he thought, was not hers. He had known her 4 days, and he was already, he admitted, more than half in love, and the love made the cowardice worse and not better, because now he had something to lose by honesty, and a coward is only a man who has found something he is more afraid to lose than he is ashamed to keep. I will tell her, he thought, soon, when the moment is right. He would learn, in time, that the moment is never right, and that men who wait for it are only waiting for an excuse. The weeks that followed were the happiest of his life, and he did not know it until they were over, which is the way of such weeks. He learned the shape of her days, and the shape of her days was the shape of her heart, laid open hour by hour for anyone with the wit to read it. He watched her forgive an old woman 3/4 of arrears on a borrowed novel because the old woman's eyes were failing, and the novel was the last pleasure left her, and watched her do it in a way that let the old woman believe she was doing Beatrice a favour by taking it off her hands. He watched her sit an hour by her mother's bed in the close upstairs room where Mistress Hale lay grey and dwindling, reading aloud in a low, even voice long after the sick woman had slept, because, Pell said, the silence frightened the mistress more than the dying did. He watched her, most undoing of all with the boy. Toby Hale was 11, and quick, and entirely ignorant of how near the edge his family stood, which was the chief of his sister's accomplishments, for she had spent herself to keep him ignorant of it. He was a clever, careless, large-eyed child, who treated the new porter as a personal discovery, and he took to following Tom about the shop with a stream of questions that would have exhausted a saint. "Why are your hands so soft for a porter?" "I've not been a porter long," said Adrian, hauling a crate. "Where were you before?" "Here and there." "That's what people say when they don't want to tell you. Were you a soldier? You stand like the recruiting man. Were you in prison? You needn't mind. I shan't tell. Beatrice says everyone has a thing they don't tell, and it's rude to dig." The boy considered. "I'm digging, though. Was it prison?" "It was not prison," said Adrian, and found he was laughing, really laughing, for the first time, and he could not remember when. "I shall find out," said Toby comfortably. "I always do. I knew about Vane wanting to marry Beatrice before she told anyone, and she didn't tell me at all. I worked it out because he smiles wrong and she goes stiff. I don't think she should. He has a horrid mouth. You have a much better mouth. You should marry her instead." He said it with the perfect, devastating innocence of a child arranging the world to his own satisfaction, and then ran off to torment Pell, leaving Adrian standing among the crates with his heart turned entirely over. And from the little gallery above, where the cheaper volumes were kept, Beatrice had watched the whole of it. She had not meant to. She had gone up for a ledger and stayed for the sight of it, the big, quiet man bent to the boy's height, patient with a patience that no one had paid him for and no one was watching to admire, answering nonsense as gravely as he would have answered a magistrate. Toby had no father. Toby had been starving, in the particular way of a clever boy, for a man who would take him seriously, and here was a hired stranger giving him freely the thing she could not buy at any price, and giving it, she understood, with a small painful jolt, because it was simply in him to give, the way water runs downhill. "You should marry her instead," the boy had said. She pressed her hand to her mouth in the dimness of the gallery, and was ashamed of the warmth that went through her, ashamed and unable to stop it. She knew exactly what she was. She was a woman about to sell herself to Hugh Vane to keep a roof over her mother and her brother, and she had no business in the world, letting her foolish heart lean toward a penniless porter with a soft voice and soft hands and a way of holding himself, even now, even bent, as though he had been born to give orders rather than take them. It was the worst kind of folly. It could come to nothing. It could only make the selling of herself when it came. more bitter than it already promised to be. And yet, she watched him a moment longer, and she did not go down until she had her face in order. The slip came on a wet evening near the end of the 3rd week, over a damaged book. A water-spoiled Anacreon had come in among a dead clergyman's library. The pages cockled and the ink run, and Beatrice was at the counter trying to make out a smeared line of the Greek to judge whether the volume was worth the rebinding, and failing, and not minding very much because the failure was a small honest puzzle, and she was tired of large ones. Adrian, passing with a lamp, glanced down at the open page as a man glances at anything, and the line caught him, and before the part of his mind that was Tom Carey could stop the part of his mind that was Adrian, he had read it, and the reading was wrong. "That's not the earth drinks," he said. "The compositors set it foul, or the runs misled you. It's the black earth drinks. There's a word lost in the blot. Melena. It changes the line. The whole conceit is that the dark earth drinks the rain and the trees drink the earth, a chain of drinking, so the black is the hinge of it." He heard himself and stopped, with the lamp held up and the silence opening like a pit at his feet. Beatrice did not look at the book. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long moment, and Adrian watched her arrive, by the plain arithmetic she had refused to do on the first day, at the sum of him, the soft hands and the straight back, and the recruiting man's stand, and now the Greek read off a blotted page by lamplight as easily as another man reads a tavern sign. He saw her see that Tom Carey did not add up, and he waited for the question and braced for it, and half longed for it, because if she asked he thought he might, this once, in this lamplight, tell her the truth. She did not ask. "You are," she said slowly, "a very strange sort of porter, Tom Carey." "Miss—" "No." She lifted a hand, gently, and there was no anger in her, and no suspicion either, only a kind of careful tenderness that was worse than either. "Pell told me, the first day, that you'd not portered before, and that your hands were wrong, and that I oughtn't to pry. He said everyone who comes to a place like this comes from somewhere they'd rather not speak of, and that the only kindness is not to make them speak of it. I have thought, more than once, that you must have come down in the world from somewhere high. A tutor, perhaps, fallen on hard times. A scholar's son with the scholarship and none of the bread." She closed the spoiled book softly. "I don't need to know. I find I don't want to know, if the knowing would make you leave. Whatever you are a good man now, in my shop, kind to my brother, and patient with a deaf old fool, and gentle with a sick woman you've never been thanked by. That is the only history of you I require." She smiled, and it cost her, he could see, and he did not know why until much later. "Read me the rest of the line, the right way. I should like to hear it read right, by someone who knows." And he read it her, the black earth drinking the rain, and the trees drinking the earth, and the sea drinking the rivers, and the sun drinking the sea, the whole foolish, lovely chain of the world drinking itself alive, and his voice was not steady, and she stood and listened with her ink-smudged hand flat on the counter, and neither of them moved for a while after he had done. He should have told her then. He knew it even as he failed to. But she had built him, with her own two kind hands, so perfect a hiding place, a fallen scholar she did not wish to expose, that to step out of it and say no, I am worse. I am a duke who came to test you felt, in that moment, like an act of violence against the gentleness she had just shown him. So he told himself. So the coward in him dressed itself up as a gentleman and bowed and said nothing. The deepest of it came at midnight, a week on by a single candle. He could not sleep. He had taken to coming down in the dead hours when the shop was his alone, to reshelve and to think, and on this night he was high on the rolling steps with a candle on the shelf beside him when he heard her on the stair. She came in a wrapper with her hair down her back and a shawl pulled close, and she stopped at the foot of the steps when she saw him, and neither of them spoke of how improper it was, a mistress and her man alone in the dark, because it did not feel improper. It felt like the only honest hour either of them had. "You don't sleep," she said. "Not often. I never have. The dark is when the accounts come due." He came down, slowly, and stood near her in the small ring of candlelight, and the shelves rose into blackness all around them like the walls of a well. "I am sorry. I'll go up, if I'm disturbing." "You're not." She wrapped the shawl tighter. I came down for the company of the books, I think. They're easier than people at this hour. They don't want anything of me. A pause. Neither do you. I've noticed that. Everyone in my life wants something of me, and most of them are owed it, and I give it, and there is never any left over. You are the only person in this house who has never once asked me for anything. She looked up at him, her face soft and tired and unguarded in the light. Why is that, I wonder? Because, he thought, I came here meaning to take the largest thing of all, and I have not the courage to say so. Perhaps, he said carefully, I have spent a great deal of my life being wanted for the wrong reasons, and I have found it restful to be a man no one has any reason to want at all. Restful, she repeated, and something moved in her face. Yes, I know what you mean by that. More than you'd think. She was quiet a moment. When my father was alive, people were kind to me because I was Hale's daughter, and Hale gave good measure and forgot half his debts. When he died, the same people grew cold because I was nobody's daughter and nothing was owed me. And now Vane is kind to me, in his fashion, because he wants to own me, and the whole town has begun to be kind again because they think I'll be Vane's wife and worth knowing. I have been, in my little way, exactly what you describe. Wanted always for the wrong reasons. Counted. Never once that I can remember. Simply seen. She laughed, low and not quite happily. Listen to me, the mistress of a drowning shop, pitying herself to her own porter at midnight. I see you, said Adrian. It came out of him without permission, low and plain, and he could not call it back and did not want to. I have seen you every day for a month. I have seen you forgive what you cannot afford to forgive, and stand where you have no strength to stand, and give that boy a whole and happy childhood out of a ruin, single-handed, in the dark, where no one is watching to praise you for it. I do not think I have ever in my life seen anyone so clearly, and I will tell you, miss, since it is midnight, and the books are listening, and nothing said now need be remembered in the morning, I should grieve to leave this place, more than I have grieved to leave anywhere I have ever been. That is the truth, whatever else of me is not. The silence after that was long, and it was full, and it held the two of them like cupped hands. She did not step toward him, and he did not step toward her, for there was a debt between them, and a name between them, and a sick woman, and a sleeping boy above them, and a man with a glove who would call at the quarter. But she looked at him, and he looked at her, and in the look was everything that the look could not be allowed to become, and it was, in its way, more than a kiss, because a kiss can be taken, and a look like that can only be given. Whatever else of you is not true, she said at last, very quietly, I find I do not care. Good night, Tom Carey. And she took up the candle, leaving him in the dark, and went up the stair, and he stood among the invisible books and understood that he had made the one mistake from which his careful, cowardly heart could not protect him. He had stopped testing her. He had fallen entirely in love with her, and he had done it while wearing another man's face. The reproach came from his godmother, as reproaches did. Lady Honora Crewe was the only soul in the world who knew where the Duke of Ravensmoor had got to, because she was the only soul he had told, and she had not approved, and she had ways of summoning him that did not admit of refusal. He went to her in the cold light of a country morning, having walked out to the great house where she was staying with cousins, and she received him in a cluttered morning room and looked him over from his rough coat to his honest boots with an expression of withering fondness. Well, she said, here is my godson, the Duke of Ravensmoor, dressed for a hanging. His own, I should hope, for he has earned one. She did not invite him to sit. How long? How long what, ma'am? How long do you mean to go on playing the beggar in that poor girl's shop? Don't gape. I know the whole of it. The Hale girl, the bookseller's daughter, with the sick mother and the debt and the dreadful veins sniffing round her skirts. You went to test whether a poor woman could love you for yourself. Lady Honora's mouth twisted. And? Speak. Can she? Yes, said Adrian. He found he could barely say it. Beyond anything I deserve. She is Honora. She is the finest creature I have ever. Spare me the inventory of her virtues. I have no doubt she is a paragon. The good ones always are. That is what makes us treat them so badly. The old woman's eyes were suddenly very hard and very clear. So, she has passed your test. The test you had no right to set, but never mind that, the harm's done. She loves a penniless porter named Tom Carey. There is only one trifling difficulty, Adrian, and it is this. Tom Carey does not exist. You have made a woman fall in love with a man you invented, and every day you let it stand. You make the lie larger, and the larger it grows, the more it will hurt her when it breaks, and break it will, for lies of this size are not kept, they are only postponed. She leaned forward on her stick. You think you are testing her honesty. You are spending hers to buy yourself certainty. That is theft, child, dressed in a philosopher's coat. Tell her today, before circumstance tells her for you, because if she learns it from any mouth but yours, or worse, learns it at the worst possible moment, you will have taught her that the one man who saw her was also the one man who lied to her longest. Do you understand me? I understand, he said low. I will tell her. I have only been waiting for the moment to be right. Yes, I have buried 2 husbands and outlived every friend I ever cared for, and I will tell you a thing about the right moment. She sat back. It does not come. It is the most reliable liar in the human heart. Men who wait for it are not waiting. They are hiding and calling the hiding patients. Go home, Adrian. Go home and stop being a coward in fancy dress. She softened all at once into something almost tender. She sounds worth more than your fear, my dear. Most things are. He walked back to Harnwell resolved. He had the words ready. He had said them over in his head 100 times along the wet road. He would find her that very evening and lay the whole truth at her feet and let her do with it what she would. And if she sent him away, he would deserve it. And if she did not, he would spend his life earning the knot. And then he came into the warm shop out of the cold, and Toby ran to show him a kite, and Pell wanted help with the press, and Beatrice gave him a smile across the counter that he could not bear to spoil, and he thought, not tonight. She is tired tonight. Tomorrow, one more ordinary day cannot matter. And he took the kite and helped the old man and warmed himself at her smile, and the moment, as moments do, slipped by him and was gone, and did not come again before the rain. For while he had been resolving and delaying, Beatrice had been doing arithmetic of her own, alone, over the ledger, late, with the figures that did not move however she shifted them. There was no way out. She had known it for weeks and had let herself foolishly hope, and the hope had a porter's face, and she was done with hoping now. The shop could not pay the quarter. Her mother could not be moved without dying and could not stay without money. Toby needed school and bread and a future, and there was none of the 3 in a debtor's prison or a poorhouse. There was one rope thrown across the gulf, and it was Hugh Vane's hand, and she had only to take it, and the whole family would be drawn up to safety, and the price of the rope was herself. So be it then. She was not the first woman to be sold for her family's bread, and she would not be the last, and she would do it with her face in order, and let no one, least of all a certain porter, see what it cost her. She would not even let herself name what it cost her. She wrote it out plain in her own heart, the way she wrote the figures in the book. I will marry Vane. I have nothing else to give them. I have nothing to wait for. There is nothing to wait for. And she underlined it twice, and blotted it, and went up to bed, and did not weep, because weeping was a luxury, and she had given up luxuries some time ago. Vane came at the quarter, in the rain. It came down hard that day, drumming on the shop windows, and he came through it with the bond itself in a leather case, the signed paper, the actual rope, and he laid it on the counter between them with the air of a man revealing a winning hand. Mistress Hale had been brought down, grey and trembling, to a chair by the fire, for Vane had asked particularly that the family attend him, liking, Adrian thought from the shadows where he stood, an audience for his mercy. But Beatrice had sent Toby off to the binder's on an invented errand the moment she saw Vane come down the street, so that the boy at least was spared the sight of it, and the one accomplishment she had bled herself white to keep held a little longer. I shall be plain, Miss Hale, Vane said, for I am a plain man of business, and you are a sensible woman. The account falls due today, and cannot be met. We both know it. By the strict letter I might have the bailiffs in by evening, and this shop, with all in it, made over to me, and your mother and brother turned into the street within the law and without remedy. He let that sit, watching it land on the grey woman by the fire, who pressed a trembling hand to her mouth and made no sound. I am not a hard man, whatever the town says. I make you, instead, an offer. Marry me, and the debt is cancelled the day we wed. Your mother shall be nursed in comfort. The boy shall go to a good school at my charge. This shop, which you love, I shall keep open as your plaything, a pretty hobby for my pretty wife. I'm in no hurry, Miss Hale. A man does not rush a thing he means to keep. I shall call again tomorrow at noon for your answer, and until then I shall stay my hand and let the bond sleep. But I think, and the smile came, slow and certain, I think you are too good a daughter and too good a sister to give me any answer but the one I want. He had judged her perfectly. That was the cruelty of it. He had found the one lever that would move her, her love of the very people in the room, and he had set the audience there so that she could not refuse him without refusing them to their faces. He gathered his case and bowed. Tomorrow at noon, then. Do not trouble to see me out. And he went into the rain and left the offer lying on the counter like a thing already accepted. Beatrice stood very still for a moment. Then she settled her mother, and she went, white and steady, into the storeroom at the back, where the crates were to be alone for the space of one breath before she went to find the rest of her courage. Adrian followed her. He found her standing among the stacked crates with her back to the door, and her hand pressed flat to the topmost, as she had pressed it to the counter on the day she defended him. The way, he understood now. She steadied herself when the ground gave under her. Beatrice! She turned. She had her face in order, all but the eyes. You should not call me that, she said gently. It was never proper, and after tonight it will be less so. She drew a breath. I am going to marry Mr. Vane, Tom. You will have heard it. There's no door thick enough in this house to keep anything from being heard. I wanted to tell you myself because— her voice caught once, and she mastered it. Because you have been a great kindness to me, and to Toby, and I would not have you hear it cold. Your place here is safe. When I give him my answer tomorrow, I shall make it a condition of my consent. I will not come to him unless you and Pell are kept on, and he wants me enough to grant it. So you need not fear for your bread. You will have a home here, as long as you want one. I shall see to that much at least. She meant to bargain, Adrian understood in the very hour of her own selling, for the security of a porter. She stood at the edge of the gulf and would spend part of her last strength to make sure that he did not fall in after her. And she was telling him gently, so gently, so as not to wound a poor man with a hope he had no business owning. Don't, he said. The word came out of him cracked. Beatrice, don't. Don't do this. There is another way. There is no other way. She said it kindly, and that was the unbearable part, that she said it kindly, that she stepped toward him and looked up into his face with all the tenderness she had refused herself, and all the pity she could not help, and laid the truth on him as softly as she could so that it would only break and not crush. I know, she said. I think I have known for a long while what is in your face when you look at me, and I will not pretend I have not felt the same, because we are past pretending, you and I have too few honest hours left to waste this one. But it cannot be, Tom. Look at us. You have nothing. I have less than nothing. I have debts and a dying mother and a boy who must be fed. You cannot save me. You have not a shilling in the world, and it is shillings in the end that the world is made of, however we wish it otherwise. Her hand rose and rested for one moment against his cheek, the same cheek Vane had struck with the glove, and her eyes were full. You have nothing to give me but yourself, and it is the dearest thing anyone has offered me in years, and it is not enough, and it breaks my heart that it is not enough. There is nothing to wait for. Let me go and do what I must. And there, in the storeroom, with the rain on the high window, and her hand on his face, and the lie filling his mouth like dust, the whole edifice of his cowardice came down at last, because she had reached the one place his fear could not follow her, the place where her gentleness, meaning only to spare him, had become unbearable. She was grieving. She was grieving over Tom Carey, a man who did not exist, mourning the impossibility of a poverty that was itself a fiction, breaking her heart on the lie he had built, and thanking him for the breaking. He could not let her walk out of that room and sell herself in mourning for a ghost. "I have not nothing," he said. She went still under his words. "My name is not Tom Carey." His voice was low, and it shook, and he did not care. "There is no porter. There never was. My name is Adrian, and I am the Duke of Ravensmoor, and I came here a month ago in borrowed clothes to find a woman who might love me without knowing what I was, because I was a coward who had been counted all his life and never once seen, and I did not know how else to learn it. I came to test you, and I found—" his voice failed and he forced it on. "I found you, and I have loved you since the day you stood between me and that man, with nothing in the world to gain by it, and I have been too great a coward to tell you, because once I told you I should have to risk you hating me, and I would rather have had you near me as a lie than far from me with the truth. There is no debt you cannot pay. There is no future I cannot give you and your mother and Toby 10 times over. You need not marry Vane. You need marry no one. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I should have told you 100 times, and I told you not once, and I have let you stand here and grieve over a man I made up, and there is no word for what I am that you will not be right to use." The rain filled the long silence. He watched the truth go through her, and it was not joy. He had half hoped in the worst of him for joy, and there was none, and the absence of it was his sentence, and he knew it. Her hand had come down from his face. She had stepped back, and what came into her, slowly, terribly, was not the relief of a rescued woman, but the white blaze of a woman who has just discovered that she has been watched. "A test," she said. "Beatrice, you set me a test." Her voice was very quiet, and it was shaking now, and not with sorrow. "All this time, every kindness I did you, every time I stood for you, every word I said to you at midnight, when I thought I was speaking to a poor honest man with nothing, you were watching, weighing me, marking me down in some ledger of your own to see whether I came out worth your great name." She put her hand to her mouth and took it away. "I defended you to Vane, and you knew, the whole time, that you could have crushed him with a word and chose to let me spend my one scrap of power on you instead, to see if I would. I sat by you in the dark and opened my whole heart to you and told you I had never once been seen, and you let me say it, knowing you were the one man in the room who was seeing nothing but his own experiment. Do you know what you have made me? You have made me a fool in my own house. You have stood in my ruin and watched me grieve, and you have let me believe that you grieved too, as an equal, as a fellow poor wretch, and the whole time you were a duke amusing himself with how the poor love." The tears came now, and she was furious at them, and they came anyway. "I do not care that you are a duke. Do you hear me? That is the smallest part of it, and I do not care. I would have loved you a beggar. I told you so, and I meant it. What I cannot bear, what I will never forgive, is that you let me feel all of this, every wound of it, over a man who was never real. You did not lie to me about your rank. You lied to me about my own heart, and you let me pay full price for a grief you knew was counterfeit." "You are right," said Adrian. He did not defend himself. There was no defence, and he would not insult her with the attempt. "Every word. You are right. Do not," she said, "agree with me. Do not be gracious. I've had a year of men being gracious while they took things from me." She drew a long, ragged breath and put her composure back on, and it was the most terrible thing he had seen her do, that practised armouring, because now he knew the whole cost of it, and knew he had added to it. "I will not marry Vane. You have given me that much, and I will take it, because I have a mother and a brother, and I am not too proud to take a true thing from false hands when their lives hang on it. But I will not be bought, your grace, not by him with his bond, and not by you with your conscience. I would sooner starve free than be rescued into your debt. Pay it or don't, as your guilt directs you. It is no longer any concern of mine what a duke chooses to do." And she walked past him, out of the storeroom, into the shop, and up the stair, and did not look back, and he stood among the crates and did not follow her, because he had no right left in the world to follow her anywhere. He did the only thing that was left to a man who had finally understood what he was. He set about quietly, undoing the harm, and asking nothing for it. He went to Vane the next morning, early, Well before the noon the merchant had named in his own person now, in his own clothes, which had come down from town in a trunk, and the change in him as he walked into the merchant's counting-house was the change of a man putting back on a skin he had been glad to shed. Vane rose, confused, at the entrance of an evident gentleman, and grew pale by degrees as the gentleman named himself, and named the bond, and named a figure for it that was half again its worth. "I will buy the Hale debt from you," said the Duke of Ravensmoor, in a voice that Tom Carey had never been permitted, "at the sum I have named today, in full, and you will assign it to me here, and you will then have no further claim upon that family, nor occasion ever again to set your foot across their door. You will take the money, Vane, because it is a great deal more than you would get by ruining them, and because, I think, when a man who can break you offers you a profit and an exit in the same breath, even you are clever enough to take it." And Vane, who loved coin above cruelty in the end, took it, white-faced and bowing, and signed away the rope. And here the saying of the grooms came round again, for the Duke held in his hand, that morning, the power to break Hugh Vane utterly, to ruin his trade, and blacken his name, and drive him from the county, and Vane could now do nothing for him, and nothing to him, and was therefore, by the only measure that had ever told Adrian the truth, exactly the kind of man it would have cost nothing to crush. He looked at the smiling collector gone suddenly small, and he found that he did not want to crush him. There was no profit in it, and no honour in it, and he discovered no longer any taste for it in him at all, for a month behind a counter had taught him what a thing looks like from below, and he would not do to even this man what had been done to Tom Carey. "Leave Harnwell," he said, not unkindly, "and trouble no one in it again, and that is the whole of what I require of you." And he left him there with his money and his fright, diminished, unbroken, and free to be a better man if he had it in him, which he very likely did not, but the chance was his to waste. Then the Duke took the bond, and he wrote upon it, in his own hand, "Cancelled," and beneath that, "Paid in full," and he wrote a letter to Mistress Hale, not to Beatrice, addressing it to the mother as the head of the house, and in it he set the family entirely free. The debt was gone, he wrote, wholly and forever, with no condition of any kind, named or unnamed, now or ever. The shop was theirs free and clear. There was a sum settled besides, enough for the mother's nursing and the boys' schooling, given outright, a gift and not a loan, requiring nothing, expecting nothing, permitting no reply. He had done the family a great wrong, he wrote, under a false name, and this was not payment for it could not be paid for, but only the removal of a danger he had been too late and too cowardly to prevent honestly. He asked for nothing. He would trouble them no further. He hoped only that they would be happy, which they had every right to be, and which his presence could only spoil. He signed it with his true name, and below it, once in parenthesis, the name Tom, because he thought she might read the letter, though it was not sent to her, and because it was the only apology the page had room for. And then he packed his trunk, and took his leave of old Pell, who wrung his hand and said nothing about dukes, having long ago given up being surprised, and only said, "You were a poor porter, lad, but a good man, which is rarer, and I'll miss the second and not the first," which undid Adrian more thoroughly than any reproach could have. And the Duke of Ravensmoor walked out of Hale and Sons with his bag in his hand, to ride out of Harnwell forever, and the rain, which had fallen for 3 days, was thinning as he went, the cloud breaking up over the wet roofs, the first cold light coming through. He had reached the street door, his hand upon it, when her voice stopped him. "You were going to leave." He turned. Beatrice stood at the foot of the stair with the letter in her hand, for of course she had read it, and her face was not soft and was not armoured either. It was simply open, scrubbed bare, as he had never quite seen it, not even at midnight. "It seemed," he said, "the only decent thing I had left to do, to go and let you be free of me. You said you would not be bought, and you were right, and a man who has bought your freedom has no business hanging about to be thanked for it. That would only be the test all over again, in another coat. So I meant to take myself off, and trouble you no more, and—" he stopped. "Yes, I was going to leave, without asking me anything. I have no right to ask you anything." "No," she agreed. "You have not. You forfeited every right you had in this house, and you know it, and that is the first thing about you this week that I have been able to respect." She came down the last steps slowly, and stood before him with the letter held in both hands. "I have been awake the whole night, Your Grace, being angry with you, and I find I have used the anger up, every drop of it, and what is underneath it is not what I expected. Do you know what is underneath it?" He shook his head. "Underneath it is that you bought my freedom and then walked away from the use of it. You held every card a man could hold, and instead of playing them, you set them down and meant to ride off into the rain with nothing, asking for nothing, leaving me free to marry whom I liked or no one at all, free to forget you, free to spit on your name to my grandchildren if I chose. You gave me back my choice, and then you removed yourself from it, so that I could not even choose you out of gratitude or debt or fear, but only, if at all, out of the one thing you have ruined, and the one thing I find I still have whole." Her voice was not quite steady. "Out of love, you have arranged it, you wretched, roundabout, cowardly man, so that the only way left for me to come to you is freely, which is, I suppose, the only thing you ever truly wanted, and the only thing you were too frightened to ask for honestly. Beatrice, so you will ask me now." Her chin came up, and her eyes were bright, and there was the ghost of the old humour in them, surfacing through everything. Honestly, out loud, in the daylight, as yourself, with nothing hidden and nothing bought, and the door open behind you, so we both know you are free to walk through it. You have made me say a great many things to a man who wasn't real. You can stand and say one true thing to the woman who is. Put down your bag, Adrian, and ask me. He set down the bag. His hands were not steady. He, who had been certain of everything and afraid of only one thing, was wholly afraid now, and wholly without his armour. And it was, he understood, the first honest moment of his adult life. "Beatrice Hale," he said, "I have nothing to offer you that is worth as much as what you have already shown me you are. I am a coward who learned courage too late, and a liar who learned honesty from the wreck of his own lie. And the only good thing I have ever done was to come to your shop, and I did even that for the wrong reason. But I love you, not as a test and not as an experiment, and not as a duke choosing a curiosity, as a man who was nobody in your shop for 1 month and was, in that month, more himself than he had been in 34 years, because you were the only person who ever saw him. Could you, knowing all of it, the worst of it, owing me nothing and free as the air, could you ever love me? Faults, lies, coronet and all." The light came fully through the window then, the rain done, the wet street shining beyond the open door, and she looked at him a long moment, this strange, impossible man who had come to her in borrowed clothes and was leaving in his own and standing in between, and her face broke at last into the smile she had been holding back, the real one, the one without armour. "You are," she said, "a very strange sort of duke, Tom Carey." And she took his hand. They were married in the parish church at Harnwell very quietly, on a bright morning in the spring, with no carriages and no crowd and none of the pomp that a duke might command, because she would not have it, and he found he did not want it, having had his fill of being counted. Old Pell came in his best coat, scrubbed and stiff, and wept all through the service without troubling to hide it, having decided that a man may weep at the wedding of two people he is fond of whatever his dignity. Lady Honora Crewe sat in the foremost pew, dry-eyed and upright, and wore for once the look of a woman whose godson has, against all her expectation, done the one wise thing she ever told him to do. Toby stood up beside them, grinning from ear to ear, and informed everyone within hearing, more than once, that he had said so, that he had told Tom to marry her instead of horrid Vane, and that he was therefore chiefly responsible for the whole happy business, and expected to be remembered for it, which he was. Mistress Hale lived to see it, and lived some years beyond it, nursed back from the edge of the grave by comfort and rest, and the simple medicine of no longer being afraid, and she died at last in a warm bed, with her daughter's hand in hers, which is as much as anyone may ask. Toby went to school, and then to the university, and surprised no one who knew him by being clever and exasperating in equal measure, and grew into a man who treated the servants of every house he entered as though they were people, because his sister had raised him so, and his brother-in-law had confirmed it by example. Hugh Vane left Harnwell within the month, and was not much missed. Beatrice met him only once more in her life, years afterward, in a distant town, diminished and grown old and alone with his money, and she found, looking at him, that she felt no triumph and no anger, only a small, clean pity for a man who had spent his whole life acquiring things that could not love him back, and dying, at the end, the owner of everything and the friend of no one. She inclined her head to him a small, precise degree, as one does to a person, and passed on, and did not think of him again. And the shop did not close. The Duke of Ravensmoor, who could have shut it with a word and moved his duchess to any of his great houses, kept Hale and Sons open instead, and restored it, new shelves and a new press and a great wide window full of light. And it prospered, and became known through 3 counties as the best bookshop east of the city, and the strangest, for it was the only one a man might walk into and be served by a duchess, and the only one whose duke, when he was in residence, could as often as not be found up the rolling steps with a candle, reshelving in his shirt-sleeves, perfectly content. He never forgot the month he had spent as a porter. He kept on every man and boy who worked for him, with a care that the great houses marvelled at, and he learned their names, all of them, and asked after their mothers, and was known to the end of his life as a duke, who would speak as readily and as warmly to the boy who swept his step as to the king himself, and mean it the same. And in the private hours, in the dark, when the accounts came due and the shop was theirs alone, she did not call him Your Grace, and she did not call him Adrian. She called him Tom. It was the name of a man who had never existed, a poor porter with soft hands who had walked in out of the rain, and it was the dearest word she owned, and she gave it to him as the highest gift she had, because it was the name of the day he had first been seen, and being seen, had become at last the man she had thought him all along. For it is true, whatever the world's loud ledgers say, and the men who carry other men's burdens have always known it, you may learn the whole of a soul by watching how it treats the one who can do nothing for it in return. Beatrice Hale had treated a nobody as though he were a prince, owing him nothing, expecting nothing, hoping for nothing, and the nobody had turned out to be a prince after all, which proved nothing about princes but a great deal about her. That is the only kind of fortune that is never counterfeit, and the only kind worth the keeping, and she kept it all her days. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I hope this story warmed you as it warmed me to tell it. Tell me, in the quiet where you are listening, what city or what corner of the world this story has reached, and what feeling it has left behind in you, whether it brought you comfort or tears, or a little of both. And if it touched you, stay a while and subscribe, so that the next story may find its way to you as this one did.